Okay, let's get into this. I want you to start just for a second by picturing a map of the world. Just
Right.
get the globe in your head
Sure.
and then zoom in on South America. You'll see this incredibly long, thin sort of ribbon of a country clinging to the absolute western edge of the continent.
Right. That's Chile. It almost looks like just the coastline.
It does. And looking at it on a flat map, a 2D projection, it completely fails to convey the reality of what that place actually is.
Oh, absolutely. The
Or-
scale is just,
Oh.
it's completely lost.
Before we even get into the logistics of travel or where to find the best pisco sour, we have to get our heads around the sheer mind-bending scale of this country.
It's a total geographic anomaly. And the sources we looked at, they provided this visualization that I think is just perfect for this. It really reframes how you see it.
Okay, lay it on me.
So imagine you could take a pair of scissors to the map. You cut out the shape of Chile,
Right.
and then you flip it horizontally, and you lay it across Europe.
Okay, I'm picturing that. Where does it land?
It would stretch all the way from Lisbon, Portugal, on the west coast,
Wow.
all the way to Moscow, Russia, in the east.
That's actually hard to process. Lisbon to Moscow, you're crossing the entire breadth of Europe.
You are. You're crossing dozens of cultures, languages, multiple time zones, just in the length of a single country.
Huh. And I guess that's the key context for today's deep dive, isn't it? Because when you cover that much latitude, you're not just talking about one destination.
Not at all. You're dealing with almost every climate zone you can imagine. You've got the driest desert on Earth in the north. You've got a Mediterranean climate in the center.
Like California or Italy.
Exactly. And then you get down to, subpolar tundra in the far south. But for this deep dive, we're really focusing on a very specific slice of that map,
The main tourist route.
the main one. The source material refers to it as the Holy Trinity of Chilean tourism.
The Holy Trinity. I like that. So this is the itinerary that everyone seems to be booking right now, the greatest hits tour of Chile.
That's the one. It's the peaks, Atacama, and wine route.
Okay, break that down.
So you have the peaks in the far south, that's Patagonia, Torres del Paine, all the jagged mountains and massive glaciers.
The stuff you see on all the calendars.
Precisely. Then you have the Atacama in the far north lunar landscapes, the driest desert in the world. And then sandwiched right in the middle, you have the wine valleys just outside of Santiago.
On paper, that sounds like the ultimate vacation. It's perfect. You get glaciers, you get desert, you get a world-class Cabernet.
It sounds incredible.
It's the kind of trip that generates those social media themes that make you intensely jealous. You know the ones?
Oh, yeah.
The glowing red towers of Torres del Paine at sunrise, that one solitary figure walking across a giant salt flat, looking like they're on Mars.
And that brings us right to the heart of what we need to unpack today. Because there is a massive gap between the Instagram version of Chile, which is all those glowing peaks, romantic solitude, and wine glasses clinking at sunset. And then there's what the sources call the logistical reality.
And based on the dossier we've come through, that reality is not exactly a walk in the park. It is not a show up and see what happens kind of country.
Rugged is the polite word for it. The reality is 60-mile-per-hour winds that can literally, not figuratively, knock you off your feet.
Okay.
It's water pipes freezing solid in your hostel so you can't shower for 3 days. And, maybe the most painful part, it's paying prices that rival New York or London for amenities that are, well, decidedly basic.
So we are debunking the budget backpacker's paradise myth right out of the gate here.
Aggressively. In fact, one of the sources we looked at makes this really bold claim that I think sets the stage for our entire analysis.
What's the claim?
They argue that Chile is essentially the New Zealand of the Americas.
Okay, I can see that. Epic scenery, end of the world, sort of Lord of the Rings energy.
Exactly that. But, and this is the critical difference, it comes with about half the infrastructure of New Zealand and double the logistical headaches.
Wow. New Zealand scenery, double the headache. That paints a very, very specific picture.
It's the perfect frame. So our mission today is to figure out if the vibe actually survives the logistics.
Right. Does the magic hold up against the reality of the price tags and the planning?
Exactly. We need to strip away the romance and look at the spreadsheets. We're going to break down the specific costs because they are genuinely shocking. And we need to figure out exactly which type of traveler can actually handle this trip. Is this for you? Or are you, frankly, better off looking somewhere else?
Let's start with the context. Why now? Why are we talking about this so much right now? It feels like my entire feed is suddenly full of people wearing puffy jackets in Patagonia.
Yeah.
What's driving this surge to the bottom of the world?
Well, we're in the middle of a very specific economic bottleneck. You have to remember, during the peak of the pandemic, Chile had some of the most complex, strictest entry requirements on the entire planet.
I remember hearing about that. It wasn't just show your Vax card, was it?
Oh, not at all. It was a fortress.
Hmm.
You needed mobility passes that had to be approved, daily health check-ins on an app, specific insurance policies. It was a lot.
A huge barrier to entry for the casual traveler.
It kept almost everyone away. But now, those gates are wide open. All the restrictions are gone. And what we are seeing is a classic supply and demand collision.
All that pent-up demand.
Years of pent-up demand. Everyone who put their dream trip to Patagonia on hold for 3 years is now flooding into the market all at once.
And I'm guessing the supply side, the hotels, the guides, hasn't been able to scale up that fast. You can't just, 3D print a hotel in a national park.
You can't. You can't just build new lodges on the edge of a glacier overnight. And this bottleneck is most critical in Torres del Paine down in Patagonia.
That's the main part.
That's the crown jewel. The demand for beds, and I mean literally just a horizontal surface to sleep on, is vastly outpacing the available supply. And we're not just talking about luxury hotels here. We're talking about campsites, basic bunk beds, everything.
Which touches on another myth the sources really wanted to highlight, this idea of the empty frontier.
Yes.
When I look at the photos of Patagonia, I see these vast, empty landscapes. I see a lone hiker communing with nature. I don't see a line.
And that's the marketing doing its job perfectly.
Yeah.
And to be fair, large parts of the country are empty. But the reality of this Peaks Atacama wine route is that it funnels thousands and thousands of people into very specific, very narrow corridors.
So geographically, the country is huge, but the actual tourist infrastructure is like a narrow pipe that everyone's trying to squeeze through.
That's the perfect analogy. You're all fighting for the same square footage. You might have this expectation of being alone in the Valle de la Luna and the Atacama, having this, spiritual sunset moment.
Right, just you and the vastness of the desert.
The reality, you are very likely standing shoulder to shoulder next to 6 tour buses and 50 other people with selfie sticks, all fighting for the exact same photo angle.
It's a congregation, not a solitary confinement.
Exactly. The solitude is an illusion unless you have the money to buy your way far off the grid.
Which brings us to what the sources call the adventure prerequisite. We need to be crystal clear with the listener here. This is not a beach vacation.
Not even close. This isn't Tulum or Bali, where you just sit by a pool and the biggest stress of your day is deciding what cocktail to order next.
Right.
This itinerary requires constant, and I mean constant, often grueling movement. We are talking about a minimum of 4 domestic flights just to connect these 3 regions.
4 separate flights just to get around inside the country.
Minimum. Santiago to Calama for the Atacama, Calama back to Santiago, Santiago down to Punta Arenas for Patagonia, and then Punta Arenas back to Santiago to fly home.
That's a huge chunk of your vacation time just spent in airports and on planes.
A massive chunk. And it requires real physical resilience. You're moving between extreme climates, from searing desert heat to glacial cold. You're dealing with high altitude. And you're managing complex logistics the entire time. If you're not prepared for that grind, you are going to be miserable no matter how beautiful the view is.
Okay, so let's assume our listener is resilient. They're up for the challenge. They book the ticket. Now they are landing in Santiago. Let's do a deep dive into Region 1, the arrival. What is that first impression when you step off the plane?
So most international flights land in Santiago, the capital. And geographically, Santiago sits in this giant bowl, completely surrounded by the Andes Mountains. On paper, that sounds majestic, right?
It sounds incredible. You expect to look out the window and see these massive snowy peaks towering over the city, like Salt Lake City or Denver, but on a grander scale.
It does sound like that, but living in a bowl also creates a very specific meteorological trap. Air quality. Exactly. Without regular rain to wash the air out, all the smog and particulate matter from the city gets trapped in that bowl. It just sits there like a lid on a pot.
So your first view out of the airplane window might not be these crystal clear, jagged peaks.
It might be a thick gray-brown haze that completely obscures the mountains. It's not the pristine start that people imagine.
Right. But once you get on the ground, what's the feeling?
The first thing that hits you is how distinct it feels from its neighbors. If you've traveled in, say, Bolivia or Peru, Landing in Santiago is a real shock to the system.
How so?
It feels incredibly modern. You land at this slick, glass and steel airport that feels brand new. The highways are perfectly paved and solid. The whole infrastructure feels, well, developed. It feels like you could be in Southern Europe or North America.
That sounds like a positive, though, an easy transition into the continent.
It is, until you look at the price tag. And this is the first real financial slap in the face. You decide to get from the airport to your hotel in the city center, usually in a nice neighborhood like Providencia or Lastaria. You open the Uber app,
Then,
and it's going to cost you between 25 and 30 US dollars.
for an Uber ride, that's basically U.S. pricing. That's a Chicago O'Hare or Miami airport fare.
Exactly. And that one ride sets the tone for the entire trip. You are not in a cheap Latin American destination where your dollar is going to buy you a feast. You are in a place with first world costs.
And beyond the cost, there's a cultural rhythm you have to adjust to, right? The sources called it the siesta factor.
Yeah, and it's not quite as rigid as, say, Spain, where everything shuts down in the middle of the day. In a big city like Santiago, most things stay open. But the whole clock is shifted later.
Especially for food.
Especially for food. If you're jet-lagged and hungry, and you try to find a nice place for dinner at 6:00 p.m., you are going to struggle. Restaurants will either be empty or completely closed.
So when does the city come alive?
Much later. If you walk into a restaurant at 7:00 p.m., you will likely be the only person there. The locals start showing up around 8:00 p.m.
Good to know. And what about the vibe on the street? You said it feels modern, but does it feel safe?
The vibe is vibrant. There's incredible street art everywhere, especially since the social protests a few years ago. There's a lot of creative energy. And in the nice neighborhoods like Lasaria, it feels safe to walk around.
Oh.
But the word the sources kept using is edgy.
And is that edgy like artistically cool edgy, or edgy like watch your back edgy?
A bit of both, but definitely the latter. It means you cannot be complacent. It is not a place where you can walk around staring at your new iPhone, totally oblivious to your surroundings.
So situational awareness is key.
Absolutely. Snatch and grab theft is a real and common issue.
Yeah.
You just have to be present and aware.
Got it. So Santiago is the gateway, but most people, they don't linger there for too long. They want to get to the extremes. Let's head north. Region 2, the Atacama Desert.
Okay, so this is where the sensory shock really kicks in. You take a 2-hour flight from Santiago up to a city called Calama, and then you take about an hour-long shuttle or drive to the little oasis town of San Pedro de Atacama.
And what's the first thing you notice?
Before you even really register the landscape, it's the dryness.
We're talking about the driest non-polar desert on Earth, right?
Yes, and your body feels it instantly. This is not a subtle thing. Your lips will start to crack within an hour of arriving if you aren't constantly applying lip balm. Your skin feels tight. Your nostrils feel dry.
And the light.
The light is different. The sources describe the sun as feeling like a physical weight on your shoulders. It's not just bright. It's an intense, direct radiation. You feel completely exposed.
Now, what about San Pedro, the town itself? I feel like because of the prices of the luxury hotels there, people might picture a sort of resort town, like a Palm Springs in the desert.
It is the absolute opposite of Palm Springs. The aesthetic is pure Star Wars. It feels like a frontier outpost on the planet Tatooine.
I love that description.
It's a dusty adobe town. The roads are dirt. There's no pavement. Stray dogs are wandering around everywhere. It feels temporary and raw, like a place that really shouldn't exist in such a harsh environment.
So where does all the money go? If I'm paying top dollar for a hotel, what am I actually getting?
That's the fascinating contrast. It's a place of hidden, walled-off luxury. You can be walking down a dusty dirt road, eating dust from a passing truck, dodging a stray dog.
Sounds glamorous.
And then you step through a very modest-looking mud wall, and suddenly you're in a 5-star luxury oasis. Manicured gardens, pristine swimming pools, impeccable service. It's an incredibly jarring juxtaposition.
So you're in the middle of nowhere, but sipping a $20 cocktail by a designer pool.
That is San Pedro in a nutshell.
Okay, there was one very specific health warning for this region that really stood out in the notes. It's about the water.
This is critical, and it's not the usual traveler advice. Normally when we say don't drink the tap water in a foreign country, it's because of bacteria, right? You're trying to avoid getting a parasite or, Montezuma's revenge.
Sure, you boil it or filter it.
In San Pedro, the threat is totally different. It's not biology, it's chemistry.
What are we talking about?
Arsenic. Due to the intense volcanic geology of the region, the ground is naturally full of heavy metals, and the water supply has naturally high levels of arsenic.
So boiling it doesn't help at all.
No, boiling doesn't remove arsenic. If anything, it might concentrate it as the water evaporates.
Yeah.
You are strictly 100% on bottled water here for everything. Brushing your teeth, drinking, everything.
That is a serious warning.
It's a geological reality you just cannot ignore. Locals have adapted over generations or have specific, intense filtration systems, but as a tourist, you don't risk it.
Okay, duly noted. Bottled water is non-negotiable in the north. Now let's flip the entire map upside down and go to the complete opposite extreme. Region 3. Patagonia. The peaks.
If the Atacama is all about the sun and the dryness, Patagonia is about the absolute chaos and violence of the weather.
I've heard the phrase 4 seasons in a day.
In most places, that's a cute figure of speech. In Patagonia, it is a literal hour-by-hour forecast.
I feel like I've heard that about Scotland or Melbourne. You know, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes.
This is different. This is extreme. Within a single 24-hour period, you can genuinely experience hail, then blazing sun that burns you because the UV is so high, then horizontal rain, and then snow, and the wind. We have to spend a moment on the wind.
I've heard horror stories. Is it really that bad?
60-mile-per-hour gusts are not a storm. That is standard. That is just a Tuesday in Patagonia.
Wow.
And it changes everything. It changes how you move. It changes how you have to dress. It just wears you down physically. You are constantly fighting the air just to walk in a straight line.
And what does that actually feel like?
The sources mention people having their prescription glasses literally ripped off their faces and blown away, or people opening their rental car door and a gust of wind catching it and bending it all the way backward, breaking the hinges.
That's a level of wind I can't really comprehend.
It's a physical force you have to respect.
Okay, and what about the food down there? I would assume with all that coastline right next to Antarctica, the seafood must be unbelievable.
You would think so. You're right next to some of the richest oceans in the world. But the sources are very, very clear on this, and it is a major letdown for anyone who travels for food.
Oh.
You have to debunk any expectation of gourmet dining in Patagonia. The food is described again and again as purely functional.
Functional food. That sounds like military rations or astronaut food.
It's fuel.
Yeah.
You eat because you need calories to hike in the cold and the wind. That's it. But the real disappointment is the combination of high cost and poor quality.
Give me an example.
One source mentioned ordering king crab in Puerto Natales, which is the main gateway town. They paid $80 for the dish.
$80. For that price, you're expecting something life-changing, fresh out of the ocean, perfectly prepared.
Right. Instead, what they received was clearly frozen, watery, and bland, completely tasteless.
$80 for frozen crab. That physically hurts to hear. Why is it like that? Is it a scam?
It's what the sources call the remoteness tax. Getting any ingredients, especially fresh ones, down to the bottom of the world is a massive logistical nightmare. The supply chains are long and expensive.
And you, the tourist, end up paying for that entire logistics chain.
You do. Plus, a lot of the best catch is frozen on the boats and exported immediately to lucrative international markets in Asia and North America.
Now, we absolutely have to talk about what seems to be the single biggest pitfall in the entire country. The sources label it trap number 1, the W-Trek availability fallacy.
This is where dreams go to die if you're not prepared. The W-Trek is the famous, iconic multi-day hiking route in Torres del Paine National Park. It is the crown jewel of South American hiking.
It's the reason most people go down there in the first place.
Exactly. The problem is that many travelers, especially from North America or Europe, assume it works like their national parks at home. You know, you show up at the gate, you pay an entrance fee, maybe get a backcountry permit on the spot, and you go hiking.
And I take it you absolutely cannot do that.
You cannot. We have reports from the sources of people literally crying in the streets of Puerto Natales because they flew all the way to the bottom of the world, and they were denied entry to the trails because they didn't have a reservation.
So why? How does the system work? It sounds unnecessarily complicated.
It is mind-bogglingly complex. The campsites and the refugios, the basic lodges along the trail, are not run by one single organization.
Oh, that's the problem.
It's the core of the problem. They are run by 3 different competing entities. A company called Vertice, another company called Los Torres, and CONAF, which is the government park service.
And let me guess, their booking systems are not connected in any way.
Of course not. They don't talk to each other at all. And to hike the full trail, you have to book each night's accommodation with each of these specific companies individually on their separate websites.
And you have to do this how far in advance?
At least 6 months, often more. And imagine trying to coordinate that. Let's say you book night 1 with Vertis and night 3 with Los Torres, but the campsite for night 2, which is run by CONAF, is sold out.
Your whole trek collapses. You can't bridge the gap.
It's over. The entire plan is ruined because of one missing link in the chain.
Can't you just pitch a tent somewhere else in the wild if you can't get a spot? Just wild camp.
Absolutely not. You cannot just camp illegally. The park rangers are incredibly strict, and they will find you and kick you out. Fire risk is a massive, massive issue there. They've had huge, devastating forest fires started by careless tourists in the past, so they are not messing around. No booking, no entry. Period.
That sounds unbelievably stressful. So if you're listening to this now and you realize you've missed that booking window, is your Patagonian dream just dead?
Not necessarily, but you have to pivot hard. The fix is to base yourself in the town of Puerto Natales and do day trips. You can still see the park. You just take a bus or drive in for the day, do one of the beautiful hikes that are accessible from the road, and then you leave the park at night.
So you can still see the famous towers and lakes?
Yes. Or you can book guided tours that sometimes have access to reserve spots. But that dream of the multi-day independent backpacking trip, that requires military-grade planning half a year in advance.
Okay, this brings us very naturally to the financial deep dive. We've hinted at it, but let's talk hard numbers. The sources all mention sticker shock. How bad is it really?
It is significant. The currency is the Chilean peso, the CLP, but for all intents and purposes, the prices are effectively near U.S. or Western European standards. This is not a cheap country.
Let's break it down by accommodation style. Give me the range. Let's start with a backpacker.
Sure. So if you are a backpacker, you might be used to paying maybe $10 or $15 for a hostel dorm bed in parts of Peru or Bolivia. In Santiago, a basic hostel bed will run you about $20. But then you get to the tourist hotspots. In San Pedro de Atacama, that same dorm bed jumps to $40 a night.
$40 for a bunk bed.
Okay.
And on the W Trek itself?
This is the wildest part of the budget. If you want a bed in a refugio on the trail, which is literally just a bunk bed in a shared dorm room, sometimes with a very basic meal plan included, you are looking at $150 to $200 US per night.
Wait, hold on. $200 for a bunk bed, a piece of plywood, and a thin mattress.
Yes. You are paying for the location. It is the ultimate captive market. There's nowhere else to sleep.
But if you bring your own gear, your own tent?
Even then, if you just want to rent a 6x6 patch of dirt to pitch your own tent on, the campsite fees are $25 to $30 per person.
That is more than a private hotel room in most of Southeast Asia.
It is. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, the luxury traveler.
What's their experience like?
For them, the sky is the limit. The famous all-inclusive adventure lodges like Explora or Awasi, they charge upwards of $1,500 a night.
But I assume for that price, you're getting more than just a bed.
Oh, for that price, they handle everything. Private guides, gourmet food, top-shelf liquor, all your transportation. You don't open your wallet once you're through their gates.
Transport seems to be the other big budget killer, the one that sneaks up on people.
It is the killer expense that people often forget to budget for properly. Remember those 4 domestic flights we talked about?
Santiago to Calama and back, Santiago to Punta Arenas and back.
Right. If you book those at the last minute during high season, you could easily spend $800 to $1,000 US just on domestic economy class tickets.
That's the price of a flight from New York to Europe.
Exactly. Even if you are a super planner and you book months and months ahead, you're still looking at $300 to $400 for that set of flights. And car rentals have their own trap. The vast majority of cars in Chile are manual transmission, a stick shift. If you are an American who can only drive an automatic, be prepared to pay double the daily rental rate. Automatics are considered a luxury commodity there.
So if we try to sum all this up into some daily budget guidelines for the listener, what are we looking at per person?
Okay, for a truly low-budget traveler, we're talking hostels, cooking your own pasta, taking public buses, very few paid tours. You're still looking at $70 to $90 a day.
Which is very high for a low-budget trip in South America.
Very high. For a mid-range traveler, private rooms and decent hotels, maybe a rental car, a few tours, you're in the range of $180 to $250 a day per person.
Okay, and high-end?
$800 plus per day. easily.
So what's the verdict on value? Are you getting what you pay for?
That's the tricky question. You are paying a massive premium. But the counter-argument is that you're paying for safety, for political stability, and for landscapes that truly are world-class. You're paying for infrastructure that, while flawed and expensive, generally works. The roads are paved, the flights, for the most part, leave on time.
It's sort of South America light in terms of chaos, but South America heavy in terms of cost.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Okay, let's move on to the other logistical traps. We've covered the W-Trek booking nightmare in detail, but there are others. Track number 2, according to the sources, involves the altitude in the Atacama.
Yeah, this is what I call the whack-a-mole game of altitude sickness. People look at the desert, they see pictures of sand dunes, and they just think hot. They forget to think high.
Right.
The town where you sleep, San Pedro, is at about 2,400 meters, or 8,000 feet. That's already quite high, like a major ski resort, but it's manageable for most people if they take it easy.
You might get a slight headache, but you'll be okay.
Exactly. But the star attractions are much higher. The Tatio geysers, for example, one of the main tours, they're at 4,300 meters. That's over 14,000 feet.
That's higher than any peak in the contiguous United States outside of California. That's serious, legitimate mountaineering altitude.
It is. And the huge mistake people make is rushing. They land in Calama, they get to San Pedro, and because they want to maximize their short amount of time, they book the geyser tour for their very first morning.
So they go from sea level to 14,000 feet in less than 24 hours.
And the result is predictable. The sources are full of stories of tourists violently vomiting in the tour vans. It's a mess. Your body has had zero time to acclimatize. It's not just uncomfortable, it's physically dangerous. It could ruin your whole trip.
So what is the proper way to do it? What's the fix?
You have to structure your itinerary strategically, by altitude. It's a game of chess with your body. Start low. Your first day, do the Moon Valley tour, which is at a similar altitude to the town.
Let your body adjust.
Exactly. Then on day 2, maybe you do the Altiplanic lagoons, which are a bit higher in the mid-range.
Oh.
You save the highest altitude tours, like the geysers, for your very last day. You give your body those critical few days to produce more red blood cells and adjust.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Now, trap number 3, the wine day logistics. This one sounds like a scheduling error.
It's a classic geography and traffic error. People look at the map and they see the main wine valleys, like the Casablanca or Maipo valleys, are near Santiago.
Right.
So they come up with this efficient plan. They'll fly back from Patagonia in the morning, land in Santiago, rent a car or hire a driver, and try to squeeze in a winery tour before their international flight home that night.
One last toast to Chile before I leave. Sounds good on paper.
In reality, it is a recipe for disaster. First, the vineyards are at least 90 minutes from the airport, and that is with zero traffic. Santiago traffic is notoriously bad. If you get stuck in rush hour, you are going to miss your international flight. It's a huge risk.
And what do you do with all your luggage from your whole trip?
That's the other part of the trap. You have a rental car packed to the gills with your bags.
Yeah.
You leave it in the parking lot of a winery while you go wine tasting for 2 hours.
You're a giant flashing target for theft.
A sitting duck.
Yeah.
It's a very high-risk move. So the advice from the sources is clear. Don't squeeze it in. Either give the wine region a proper, dedicated day at the beginning or end of your trip, or just skip it. Trying to force it into a travel day is a recipe for stress, theft, and missed flights.
Speaking of theft, let's talk more broadly about safety. You used the word edgy earlier. What are the specific scams or risks people should be aware of?
Right. Generally, violent crime against tourists is low compared to other places in the region, but scams and petty theft are very sophisticated. The flat tire scam is a big one that targets rental car users.
Okay, how does that one work?
There are a couple of variations. Someone might subtly puncture your tire at a gas station or a red light, or they just wait for tourists to get a natural flat tire on the highway. Then they pull over, acting like a good Samaritan, offering to help you change it.
Which seems nice.
It does. But while you are distracted with the tire, usually one of them is arguing with you about where the jack is or pointing at the wheel. An accomplice is quietly opening the other doors and cleaning out your car. Passports, laptops, cameras, everything's gone.
That is nasty because it completely preys on your trust in a moment of vulnerability.
It is. Another one is right at the airport. The sources are very clear. You should never, ever follow the people who are whispering taxi at you as you exit customs.
Those are the unregistered drivers.
Exactly. You only use the official Via Controlada counters. They're the proper taxi desks inside the terminal. You prepay there and get a voucher. It's safe and regulated.
And there was a specific warning note about the city of Valparaiso.
Yes, Valparaiso is the coastal port city near Santiago. It's famous for its colorful houses built on the hills and its old funicular elevators. It looks incredible in photos. But the sources note that it is currently very edgy when it comes to theft. You need to have your camera physically strapped to your body. It is not a place to wander aimlessly down a quiet alleyway with expensive gear on display.
Got it. Okay, there is one more health specific that I found genuinely alarming in the research, and that's about the ozone layer.
This is not your standard remember to wear sunscreen warning. This is a legitimate radiation warning.
Wow.
Because of the hole in the ozone layer, which is historically centered over this part of the southern hemisphere, the UV index is frequently off the charts. The sun is described in the sources as violent.
Violent sun. That is a powerful and scary description.
It's accurate. The sources say you can get a noticeable sunburn in just 15 minutes. SPF 50 is not optional, it is mandatory. And you have to reapply it constantly. You have to take it seriously, even if it feels cold and windy outside. The UV is blasting you regardless of the temperature.
Okay, we have covered the shocking costs, the logistical traps, the frozen crab, the arsenic water, and the violent radiation. It sounds incredibly difficult.
It does.
So why do people do it? We have to talk about the highs. Because despite all of this, people are flocking there. The experience has to be worth it.
And the highs are incredibly high. That's the paradox of Chile. Despite all the logistical pain, the peak experiences are things you truly cannot get anywhere else on Earth.
So what stood out in the sources as that defining this is why it's all worth it moment?
There was one anecdote in particular about what they called the glacial moment. Picture this. You're on a boat navigation on Lago Grey in Patagonia, heading towards the massive Grey Glacier. It's freezing cold. The wind is howling.
Sounds like a typical Patagonian day.
It is. And the boat captain leans over the side with a net and fishes a chunk of ice out of the lake.
Just grabs it out of the water.
Grabs it. And this isn't just regular ice. This is ancient, compressed, brilliant blue glacial ice that is 10,000 years old. He takes it back to the little bar on the boat, chips it up with an ice pick, and puts it into a glass of pisco sour. You are drinking a cocktail chilled with ice that is older than human civilization, while looking at a wall of blue ice that stretches for miles. That is a moment of connection with the planet that stays with you forever.
That's incredible. And in the north, in the Atacama.
Stargazing. The Atacama is one of the best places on the entire planet to see the night sky. Because of the high altitude and the absolute lack of humidity, there is zero distortion in the atmosphere.
So you get a crystal clear view.
You don't even need a telescope. You can just join a tour or drive a few miles out of town, turn off the car in the whites, lie on the ground, and the Milky Way looks like a physical three-dimensional cloud hanging right over you. The silence is absolute. It's a genuinely spiritual experience.
And I guess just the sheer visual contrast of the whole trip is a massive selling point in itself.
Exactly. To be able to see the driest desert in the world and the third largest ice field in the world in the same week, that is the unique selling proposition of Chile. It is an entire continent's worth of scenery packed into one long, thin country.
But, and this is the million-dollar question, what if you want those views without all the headaches we've been talking about? Are there alternatives?
This is where we can get really strategic. If the logistics we've just described, the booking 6 months out, the expensive bunk beds, the complicated travel days, if that all sounds like a complete nightmare to you, there are two major alternatives that the sources highly recommend.
Okay, let's start with alternative number one. The sources call it lazy Patagonia.
This is the town of El Chaltén, which is just across the border in Argentina.
Why is it called lazy? I assume the hikes aren't actually easy.
No, the hiking is not easy at all. The trek to Mount Fitzroy is a beast. But the logistics are lazy. They're simple. In El Chaltén, all the major hiking trails start right from the edge of the town.
So you don't need to take a bus or a shuttle for hours to get to the trailhead.
Exactly. You sleep in a nice hotel with a comfortable bed and a private bathroom. You wake up, you eat a good breakfast, you walk out the door of your hotel, and you start hiking towards the mountain. At the end of the day, you walk back into town.
So no tents, no refugios, no carrying 50 pounds of gear on your back for days.
None of it. And no booking campsites 6 months in advance. It is significantly cheaper. The food is infinitely better. Hello, Argentine steak and Malbec. And it is 1,000 times less stressful.
That sounds incredibly appealing for people who want the epic mountain views but not the suffering. Now, what about alternative number two? The raw desert.
So if the Atacama in Chile feels a bit too manicured or too expensive with its $1,000 a night lodges, you look just north to the Uyuni salt flats in Bolivia.
Okay, how does that compare to the Atacama?
It is wilder. It is much rougher around the edges, and it is significantly cheaper. We're talking about a third of the price of a comparable tour in the Atacama. You still see the incredible landscapes, the massive white salt flats, the pink lakes full of flamingos.
So what's the catch? What's the trade-off?
The trade-off is comfort, safety, and hygiene. The standards drop noticeably. The accommodation is incredibly basic, literally hotels made of salt blocks, which sounds cool in theory but can be cold and gritty in reality. The roads are rougher, the vehicles are older. It is a true, raw adventure, whereas the Atacama is more like adventure with a 5-star safety net.
So the Sorts has actually suggested a hybrid strategy, right? Combining the best of both.
Yes. The expert recommendation for the perfect hassle-free trip might be to combine the Atacama in Chile because the good infrastructure there really helps you deal with the extreme desert environment comfortably.
Right.
With El Chalten in Argentina for the Patagonian hiking part to save money, stress, and your sanity. That might be the perfect combination.
I love that. The best of both worlds. Okay, let's wrap this all up with the final verdict. Who is this classic Chile trip actually for? Let's profile the different types of travelers.
Let's start with the backpacker on a shoestring budget.
What's the verdict for them?
Caution is strongly advised. Chile burns through cash so fast. If you are scraping by on a really strict daily budget, you risk spending your whole trip worrying and stressing about money instead of actually enjoying the incredible views. You might honestly be happier in Bolivia or Peru, where your dollar goes 3 or 4 times as far.
Okay. Next up, the mid-range couple. Maybe they have a decent budget, but not an unlimited one.
This is the sweet spot, but it comes with major conditions. This trip is perfect for them if and only if they're willing to do intense planning. You need to be booking flights and accommodation at least 3 months out and the W-Trek 6 months out. You should rent a car to avoid the high per-person tour fees. If you put in that homework, it's a fantastic, unforgettable trip.
What about the family?
It's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
With teenagers? Yes, absolutely. They will love sandboarding on the dunes in the desert and the physical challenge of the hikes. But with toddlers, it's a hard mark. The distances are just too long to have a little kid in car seat. The wind is too harsh and potentially dangerous for a small child. And, most importantly, the high altitude in the Atacama is medically risky for little bodies. Do not bring a baby to 4,000 meters.
That's a very clear warning. And finally, the luxury traveler.
For them, it's a 10 out of 10. If you have the money, Chile is absolutely incredible. The private, all-inclusive lodges solve every single logistical nightmare we've spent this entire time discussing. They pick you up, they have the best guides, they feed you gourmet food, you get all of the incredible wilderness with none of the discomfort.
So if you can pay the price, the headache simply disappears.
Completely. Money buys you smoothness and efficiency in Chile.
And what about timing? When is the best time to go?
The sources agree. March or November. That is the shoulder season. You avoid the absolute crushing crowds of January and February, which is their main summer vacation period. But the weather is still decent enough to be outside without freezing to death. It's the best balance of crowds and climate.
So if you had to summarize the reality of a trip to Chile in one sentence.
It is logistically a beast. It can be inefficient, and it is definitely expensive. But the core infrastructure generally works. And it's a place where you have to earn your views, either with your wallet or with your physical endurance and planning.
You know, it brings up an interesting final thought. This whole concept of the remoteness tax we mentioned.
Right.
We often complain about how hard it is to get to these places or how expensive they are. But in a world that's suffering from over-tourism, where almost everywhere feels accessible and crowded, maybe the difficulty of access is actually part of the value.
The barrier to entry protects the experience.
Exactly. If it were easy and cheap to get to the base of Torres del Paine, it would probably look like Times Square. The struggle makes the view at the end feel earned. It filters for people who really want to be there.
That's a great way to think about it. The friction is part of the product.
That is something to think about. Well, if you're planning on heading down there, it sounds like you need to bring your windbreaker, bring your SPF 50, and most definitely bring your wallet.
And don't forget to go online and book those campsites right now.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you on the next one.